Remember to unmute and mute.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mohala from the STAR Events team, and I'm pleased to be your host for the session this morning. Thank you all for joining this webinar on solar advancements. This one-hour session is organized by STAR Media Group and supported by OCBC Bank and our ESG Positive Impact Awards Academy sponsor Hibiscus Petroleum. This webinar is also endorsed by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, KETSA, and the Ministry of Environment and Water, KASA. It is streamed live on Zoom and on our Star Bits and Star Facebook pages. So do get on and watch it. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in right now. Do share our Facebook Live link with any of your colleagues, friends, or family who may be keen to join us this morning. All right, so a few housekeeping matters before we get into the webinar. As everyone dials into this webinar through different internet bandwidth and devices, you may or may not experience minor technical glitches. So please be patient if there are any, and we'll try to correct the issue. To minimize the risk of technical glitches, all participants have been muted and video cam turned off by default. But do participate by posting questions to our speakers. You may send in your questions at any time during the session. Click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and post your questions there if you are using Zoom. And for those who are joining us on Facebook, you can place your questions in the comments section. There will be a short survey at the end, So to those joining us on Zoom, please take a few minutes to complete it. Your feedback will help us curate more events to suit your likes and needs. Lastly, and most importantly, please engage, learn, and enjoy. We are here today to hear from 4 panelists and moderator who are very well versed in the area of solar energy and renewables to discuss on how far the solar industry has progressed and what it means for your business, what to look out for on the horizon in terms of policies and incentives for renewables, and the role that solar can play in mitigating climate change by diverting Malaysia's energy generation from the high GHG and CO2 emitting blend of burning coal, natural gas, or fossil fuels. Our panelists this morning comprise Yusrizal Yusof, who is the Managing Director of TNB Renewables Sdn Bhd, and this TNB Renewables was incorporated in 2018. He's a professional engineer offering a vast and diverse experience in renewable energy business development, asset management, short-term electricity generation planning, long-term generation expansion planning, design, installation, testing, commissioning and operations of a district cooling system with thermal energy storage, landfill gas renewable energy power generation, and energy audit. He's also familiar with the incentive-based regulation structure and has in-depth knowledge of the Malaysian electricity supply industry, MESI, M-E-S-I. Regine Chu is the project director of Yongyang Solar Roof. She's an experienced entrepreneur in solar green energy, feed-in tariff, net energy metering, and the SELCO program under Sustainable Energy Development Authority, SEDA's Commercial and Industrial Agriculture and Domestic Program. Regine is a strong green building and solar energy advocate and also a green building carbon store task force committee member. Mitch Gelber is the CEO of the Malaysia Green Building Council, Malaysia GBC, and has served for more than 10 years on the Green Building Index, the GBI Technical Committee. Amongst other projects, he currently chairs Malaysia GBC's Carbon Score Task Force, edited the 2019 book Greening Malaysia, Building Towards Sustainability, and has previously taught at the University of Malaya School of Architecture. As the founder of YI Design Sdn Bhd, he consults on building and planning projects both within Malaysia and abroad. Jonathan Khan is the Managing Director and co-founder of ERS Energy, oversees the group's energy business mainly in solar PV systems and energy management. Under Jonathan's guidance, ERS has twice achieved the milestone of developing Malaysia's largest solar plants. Both projects were successfully executed during the large-scale solar program by Energy Commission, Malaysia. ERS solar plants worldwide is valued at over RM 1.7 billion, and with the help of these solar assets, they decarbonize the environment with over 800 CO2e annually. In the next few years, ERS plans to expand vertically in terms of service offerings to both individuals and enterprises across the ASEAN region, from energy storage in renewable energy with energy storage systems, ESS, to utility grid balancing and energy control with AI and IoT, whilst keeping a keen eye on the current development of green hydrogen. To moderate the session, we have Dr. Chua Wen Xian, who is the head of Malaysian Smart Factory 4.0 under the Selangor Human Resource Development Center, SHRDC. So he obtained his PhD in Control Systems Engineering and BNG, Bachelor in Engineering, in Mechatronics Engineering from Monash University, Malaysia. His key area of expertise lies mainly in the area of control and automation systems, fault detection and identification, FDI, and predictive maintenance strategies, which are widely used in Industry 4.0 applications. He's also appointed by the Malaysia Productivity Corporation, MPC, in collaboration with the Machinery and Equipment Productivity Nexus, MEPN, as one of the mentors, advisors for the Productivity 1010 initiative to support the industries in their journey towards digital transformation. As the head of Malaysian Smart Factory 4.0, Dr. Chua and his team are focused in delivering high-impact talent development programs to accelerate the growth of local talents who would be in the workforce, supporting the growth of Industry 4.0. The programs developed by his team at the Malaysian Smart Factory 4.0 are also able to support the industries and community towards achieving sustainable digital transformation through high-impact talent development strategies. And without further ado, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Chua, our moderator for today, to commence the discussion.
All right, a very good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining in this session today. Thank you, Mohala, for the great introduction of all the panels here today. It's really good to see everybody, right? I can see a very huge turnout today, and I suppose that is also due to the big three alphabets that we see on a day-to-day basis now, ESG, right? And this is actually a very, very important topic for a lot of Malaysian industries moving forward. And this morning here with me today, I have Mr. Yusrizal from TNB Renewables. Hi, Mr. Yusrizal. Are you there?
Hi. Hello.
Hi, hello, morning.
Morning.
I also have Miss Regine Chu from Yongyang Solar Roof. Right, hi, Miss Regine. Hi, good morning. Right, Mr. Mitch Galber from the Malaysia Green Building Council. Hello, Mitch.
Hello. Good morning,
Hi.
everyone.
And of course, Mr. Jonathan Khan from ERS Energy Sendirian Berhad to join us this morning. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. All right, so we have great lineup of panelists here today, and to actually answer a lot of questions from the audience that we have today. So first off, before we start the session, perhaps I would let Mr. Yusrizal share a little bit about TNB Renewables Sendirian Berhad. How is TNB Renewables really supporting this space in terms of solar advancement? Right, Mr. Yusrizal?
Hi. Thanks again, Dr. Chua. Thanks to the Star Media Group and the sponsors. Thanks to all ladies and gentlemen for having us here today. First and foremost, let me just share our experience. We were incorporated in 2018 with the intention of growing the local and Southeast Asia renewable energy market. Obviously, 2020, no one anticipated that will be, drawn back by almost 2 years due to COVID. However, I think we are very happy to say that we have contributed quite a lot in realizing the national target towards renewable energy. We've been actively participating in LSS bidding locally. And actually, we've been working together with John and ERS very closely on those two bids. And fourth round, we are also successful. So we have been active locally. We have incorporated G-Spark. By now, I think most of us, or maybe some of us know, G-Spark is an active, and I would like to believe it's the leading rooftop service provider, active in household rooftop as well as CNI businesses. So we would like to contribute more. We are expanding our wings into Southeast Asia, looking at potentials, wind and solar in Vietnam. We are actively looking at battery energy storage as one of the options in the future. In fact, energy storage system, to be more precise, for the future. So that's about TNB Renewables, and very happy to be here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusrizal. Very good summary of what TNB Renewables is doing. So next, I have Miss Regine. Would you like to share a bit more about how Yongyang Solar Roof is really supporting this kind of solar advancement in Malaysia?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thanks to the staff for having me, and also together with the other panelists today. Good morning. So actually, let's relate to what the solar advancement is to the topic today. So we actually, as a Yongyang Solar Roof, started with since to participate in the FIT programs. So probably just have a recap and also a review of what is actually solar advancement is about. So first, we're talking about the technological advancement. We actually had started using the crystallized modules, thin film, and now we have actually more concentrated in the monocrystallized hybrid technology with higher cell efficiency. Well, actually, just give you an example. Imagine we're getting about 200 panels back then, 10 years ago, and now we have almost 3 times, and 600 watt panel is actually coming on the way. Installation-wise, I would say that it is common to see a rooftop installation started way from the Surya 1000, and then where we move on to feed-in tariff. So where we participate in this program since then. And now we could see that the advancement actually moved from rooftop installation from houses, then scale up to commercial, industrial, and in agriculture, government, and community. Then we also move on to, we can see that the market also move on to utility scales on the ground, and also look beyond rooftop, carport, and land. Floating solar and the building facade application is the next trend we are observing as well. So you can also see in the chart here in terms of price advancement. Okay, the good news is that the price has actually come down tremendously from what we observed for the past 10 years, close to almost more than 80%. And I would say that it's very affordable, and coupled with attractive payment scheme, financing instruments, which is already widely available now. Those domestic installation and commercial users could actually leverage on the for commercial, they could leverage on government tax incentive to accelerate the return investment to less than 3 years. Yeah. So that will also justify in the change the policy of the subsidized feed-in tariff, and now focusing on direct and self-consumption, which is what we are doing now, which is financially viable and bankable. Of course, we also have this, we could also observe zero cost model, whereby you can actually install and the solar for actually at zero upfront cost, and in return charge you a fixed monthly fee, which expect to be lower than your electricity bill savings. So you get to save from the solar from day one. So, so in terms of development and acceptance level, we have also observed tremendous improvement from the adoption of the consumer of higher disposable income, and installation could be seen anywhere from now to commercial, corporate to community level as well. So you can see here, that's how we also justify in terms of the policy advancement from 100% fit into the grid and to self-consumption model, net energy metering, and what's next? Where are we now? So today we're in the solar advancement topic. Where are we heading to? We actually move on from the physical grid deployment on the feed-in tariff. Then we move on to the net energy metering, a virtual net off. And now we are looking into the corporate green power program, whereby it actually promotes the offset and net off at a larger scale for corporates to actually achieve net zero emission. Well, I will say that in terms of how much potential we could tap in from, it is actually stated that we have more than about 250 gigawatt potential has been identified. And this is the direction our nation is progressed towards to achieve decarbonization and net zero goal in 2050. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Regine. Very, very good summary of the whole policy-driven renewable energy program that you have. Now, next I have Mr. Mitch Gelber from Malaysia Green Building Council. Hi, Mitch. Good morning. So how is Malaysia Green Building Council supporting the solar advancements in Malaysia?
Hi, Dr. Chua. Good to see you. So a little bit about the Green Building Council. We are a leading non-governmental organization in Malaysia. We're nonprofit, and we are completely comprised of volunteer membership. We have membership from across the building sector, the construction sector in Malaysia, including professionals, architects, engineers, developers, financial institutions, partnerships with public sector, individual building manufacturers, solar panel. Regine is one of our members. So we have a very broad-based membership from across the industry, and we promote green building programs, technologies, design practices related to green buildings, and now in the last few years, looking at beyond green buildings. So historically, green building councils around the world have focused on green building rating tools. Our Malaysia Green Building Council is a member of the World Green Building Council, which has over 70 national green building councils. And around the world, these tend to focus and historically have focused on the issue of green buildings and green building ratings. Our council within Malaysia is very rapidly looking to expand beyond green buildings. And so we're looking at issues of circular economy, health and well-being, and net zero and zero carbon building. So if we go to the next slide. So one of the programs that we have rolling out in early 2023 is what we call Carbon Score. And both Regine and I have been founding members on the technical committee looking at this Carbon Score project. It's still in the runway phase, ramping up to public release early 2023. Essentially what the Carbon Score is a individual building level, not an award, but a report for each individual building in the country. What is the carbon footprint of that building? How close is that building to achieving the ultimate goal of zero carbon emissions? Starting from 0, which is the Malaysian average, up to a score of 100, which is zero carbon emissions, zero carbon building. And one of the key components of this is solar, both decarbonization of the electricity grid, but as it pertains to this morning's discussion, on-site solar from rooftop or on-site PV generation. And so we'll talk a little bit more about it coming in the future, but this Carbon Score label is really intended to work like a energy label that the Energy Commission already has for appliances. The Ministry of Health puts a label up for all public kitchens. What is the cleanliness of the kitchen? This Carbon Score label is not a green building award. It's not for exceptional buildings. It's designed for all buildings, a real-time reporting of what the environmental impact, environmental performance is of every single Malaysian building. So just full disclosure, this graphic is a placeholder. So please don't extrapolate that these are the scores for these buildings. We've taken some liberties for discussion purposes. So don't misconstrue this graphic to be applicable for individual buildings. But let's go from there. Thanks very much. And I'm looking forward to this morning's conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mish. Great presentation from you. So last, we have Mr. Jonathan Khan from ERS Energy Sendirian Berhad. Mr. Jonathan, would you like to share a little bit more about how your company is really supporting the solar advancements in Malaysia?
Thanks, Dr. Chua. Okay, well, hi and good morning, everybody. So I'm from ERS Energy. We were founded in 2009. So we're in our 14th year of operations. We work very closly with TMB, Encik Yusrizal. So I'm happy to see him here with us today. I think in a nutshell, how far has solar come? I think for the newly initiated, I would say since 2009 until now, we have seen a 75% reduction in costs. It has become very accessible to everybody. So our primary focus in ERS is we build solar plants and systems. So from your small off-grid hut that needs some battery-powered solar systems to your home, commercial, industrial, and of course, the large-scale solar power plants right now. So in Malaysia, the industry has been budding. I think we have the right climate. We are actually in a very beautiful position in this part of the world to take advantage of the solar resources that we get. And that's why it has made this solar PV systems actually generate cheaper electricity than even some gas plants do. So that's how far we've come since I've been involved in this for 14 years. And with that, obviously, ERS, we grew together with the industry. Back in 2009, when I talk about solar, people would be thinking only solar water heaters. I think it has really picked up in popularity this past few years. It has enabled us to get about 1 gigawatt worth of PV experience. We are focused in Southeast Asia. So we have done plants in Vietnam and Philippines, mostly Malaysia, of course. And we're looking at also in Singapore and Indonesia. So the uptake is real. Why is there such an uptake? Is because it's more affordable, it's accessible. But we do have issues with the current technology, which is intermittency. And that's why we all look at some sort of energy storage, be it battery, chemical, hydrogen, whatever it may be. solar being affordable and accessible right now, it's what's driving the next stage of growth. And it's been a fantastic experience to see how the industry is maturing, which then we'll go to the next slide. These PV systems, can I have the next slide, please? Yep. PV modules generally come with a 25-year performance guarantee. It means after 25 years, you do get 80% of its capacity. So if you install 10 kilowatts today, you can expect to still have 8 kilowatts after 25 years. They can be backed by insurance companies to make sure that your warranties last, even if the companies don't necessarily. Also, the other important component in a solar PV system is actually the inverter. That is actually the brain of the system. It will convert the solar electricity into something that TNB would accept, technically, of course, so that it works well with the grid. And when all these systems actually expire at the end of 25 years, which they can still work. You don't have to dismantle them and throw them away. Some PV modules are said to be still functioning after 40 years. But this industry is still very, very new. So I think we would still need another 10 years plus before we can actually see a lot of recycling efforts come in. We have spoken to a few companies worldwide that are looking into recycling solar modules. They're separating the solar cell from the glass and from the aluminum frame. I think the commercial sense of recycling is still, it's a bit blurry. Everyone's trying to find their feet. So they're still mining for raw silicon as for now. But I think maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we would see quite a lot of recycling initiatives for solar PV systems. So that's a snapshot of how far we've come over the last, since I got involved about 14 years ago. So I hope today's session will be productive for everybody.
All right, thank you very much, Jonathan. It's really good to see a lot of progression throughout the years, especially in the area of solar technology. And as what you mentioned, Jonathan, solar is not just about water heaters anymore. It's much more than that. And I think that brings to a lot of questions from the audience here today, right? And I will probably start with the first question, right? And this is related a bit more into about cost. Right. And as mentioned by some of the panelists today, that, solar technology is actually becoming a little bit more accessible and cost effective right now. My first question would be, how about the cost of solar panels and technologies for industries and personal consumptions, right? What are the financing options or incentives that are available locally? So maybe I will give the first one to TNB, right? Mr. Yusrizal to answer the question. What are the financing options or incentives available locally right now for both industries and personal consumption?
Thanks, Dr. Chua. Very interesting questions indeed. If you look at the Q&A section, anyhow, I'll address the first two from Dr. Chua. Options in terms of, I think Regine touched a bit on this. John also mentioned about this. I think in terms of the availability of financing, especially for household solar, these are relatively, not to say limited, but there are available options. Credit cards is one of and a big option that has been considered. Either that or pure cash outlay from the homeowners. So with that, I think with the availability of net energy metering scheme, it allows for the surplus energy to be transported back to the grid, and the homeowners are able to claim achieve or receive rebates from the energy that is being translated. There are also companies that have attempted to provide zero capex solutions, even for housing options, but it's quite limited. And I believe as we go, probably options will be available in the future. There are also options of financing from the bank in terms of personal loan channels being specifically given for the solar installation, although I think the uptake might not be that great In terms of CNI, zero capex solutions are widely available, and I think most installations are under this scheme. It's very interesting to see that, you know, with the costs driven down in the market, and we can see, you know, at any time now, installation, even relatively smaller installation, 100 kilowatts, 200 kilowatts, are able to be established and able to provide tariff lower than whatever the customers are buying from the grid. So it's a very promising segment, CNI, and plus the utilization of the roof space is also beneficial. And I think going forward, the NEM, the rooftop segment is going to match the utility scale, large scale segment. Options are available, I think, for customers, and in fact, it is driven mostly by the developers.
Can I jump in, Dr. Chua?
Sure, of course, go ahead.
So I'll speak directly to the issue of personal small-scale residential land and property. So I didn't mention in the introduction, but I'm also trained as an architect, and I'm currently building a small house for my family in KL. So I just looked into this issue on a personal matter. So for a single-family landed property in anywhere in Malaysia, the average consumption is around 5 kilowatt hours per year, 5 to 6 kilowatt hours per year. That's a total installation, if you're looking at 100% solar panel, somewhere on the range of 15,000 ringgit per house. Maybe it's slightly more, maybe slightly less, depending on the size of the house. This has dropped from, you know, when I first moved to Malaysia in 2004, the cost per kilowatt peak was 20 over 1,000 per kilowatt peak. Now, just 15 years later, we're down to 3,000 ringgit or oftentimes less, depending on the size. So it's dropped by 600% in just 15 years. And that's opened up whole new possibilities. The limiting factor, especially at small scale residential, is no longer cost, it's roof area. So if you have a 1-story, 2-story property, your roof area is the limit, you know, that's the limiting factor, not your budget. Because at 15,000 ringgit per year for the initial installation, you're looking at a return on investment of about 3 years. After 3 years, maybe 3 to 4 years, sometimes maybe less, you're looking at potentially zero TMB bill, and that money goes back into your pocket. This is, again, for small scale residential development. The limiting factor at the moment is that TMB only allows you to install 75% of maximum demand. That policy hopefully will be phased out in the coming years. And then again, your roof area. So for high rise, for larger buildings, the percentage you can generate on site from your rooftop becomes smaller. And then the last thing I mentioned, Regine mentioned it sort of in passing, but there are also programs that have zero upfront cost, where the supplier will install solar panels free of charge in return that they get. I'm sorry, Regine, I'm not saying this is from your company, but these schemes do exist where a solar panel provider will install for free panels on your rooftop. In exchange, they get the right to sell back the power to the grid. So these schemes are also available internationally. They will be available in Malaysia in due course if they're not already. So cost, the takeaway is that cost is not an obstacle to adoption whatsoever. It has been in the past. The current barrier to adoption is just our capacity to think creatively about solutions, and then the particular shall we say, real estate of the site. If you have a smaller roof area, you may have to look at solar panels above your car park, solar panels at ground level, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes more of a land use issue and a density issue than a cost issue. So this has happened only in the last 5 years or so, but it's very important that we sort of transition away from this issue of only talking about cost, because that issue has really solved itself in the last few years. It's not a barrier to uptake whatsoever. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mitch. I think yes, a lot of industries and people always talk about, adoption is always the limiting factor is always the cost. But I believe that things are starting to be more accessible now, and that actually cost should not be the main factor, I would say. With a lot of schemes that are available now by the government to really push renewable energies in Malaysia, and I think this is actually one of the key factors for many industries in Malaysia to actually start exploring, renewable energy sources generally.
And Dr. Chua, it should be pointed out, it's true that every project is different, but even without government subsidy, the economics make sense. Any government subsidy just adds profit. So even from a starting point of no subsidy whatsoever, any investment where you get a 3-year return, well, that's a pretty attractive investment. That should be pointed out. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So, while I still have you here, I have one question on, every company is now starting to talk about ESG initiatives, right? How does having solar on their rooftop sort of contribute to their ESG score then? Mitch?
Well, I think when it comes to the E in ESG, the environmental impact, the most urgent imperative is our use of fossil fuels. And so there's a question in the chat group about end of life use, recycling for solar panels after their 25-year, 30-year lifespan. And that is an important issue. But the most pressing issue by far is our reliance on fossil fuels. So in Malaysia, for example, our grid sits at about 92% fossil fuel use. So electricity that we use to power our buildings, power our cities. Yusuf, I'm quoting liberally here, so please correct me if I'm wrong. There's a slightly different energy mix in East Malaysia to West Malaysia with hydropower. But by far the biggest, most urgent matter is our use of fossil fuels and the emissions associated with fossil fuel burning. Malaysia has committed internationally to the UN to reduce our emissions by 45% as compared to 2005 levels, and to achieve the ultimate goal of zero carbon neutrality by 2050. And solar panels, solar electricity is the best, by far, the best and most immediate, most actionable solution that we have. There may be other solutions in the pipeline, but this is the solution that we have now, and the economics already make sense. So this is how it contributes to ESG. Any company, any organization, any homeowner, any person, any Malaysian, take solar panels seriously. Look at how you can incorporate it into your business model. The finances already make sense, and any amount of adoption, any power generated by the sun is power that's not being generated by coal, which is 60% plus minus, oil and gas, which is the remaining 30% plus minus. Any on-site generation of solar panels from solar is critical to boosting the E in ESG. And the last thing I'll say is that this is a balance. I mean, like most things when it comes to the environment, this is a dynamic situation. It can be complex. And so there's a balance between, it's important to point out that when we say it's up to individual homeowners and individual business owners, businesses to install solar, individual factories to install solar, this is sort of a stopgap, because ultimately the onus on the power supply lies with the public sector. You know, we as individual Malaysians do not have the capacity to decide where our electricity comes from at source, and so it's really important that this is very clearly understood. Us putting solar panels on our own roof, on our own factory roofs, our own business roofs, is a stopgap until the government policy catches up. And under the current government, the recently current government, we'll see what the policy is. Under the previous government, I'm not going to say names here, but the previous government, the target was relatively modest. They came up with an energy report, a national energy report a few months ago, where they were targeting 4% renewables by 2040. Very modest. 20 years, we go from 1% to 4% plus minus. Very modest target. The immediate past government had a target that was closer to 30%. And so our political landscape is shifting, but the imperative to transition to more renewable energy sources is constant. And so, while we can't afford to sit around and wait for our government to take action, they will eventually. But in the immediate time frame, we have options that we can do without waiting for government action. So let's do both. Let's hit it from individual Malaysians, and let's hit it from the Malaysian government, and we'll meet halfway, and that's how we achieve our environmental goals and objectives.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Mitch. So the next question I have on this Q&A session here, I'm going to pass it to Regine. Regine, the current ROI is said to be 7 to 8 years at the moment, right? Could this be brought down to 3 years or even lesser, right? Mitch mentioned a lot about how the governments, past and present, are really supporting the initiatives. And, at this current moment, can it be brought down to even lesser than 3 years in terms of ROI? What do you think?
Thank you, Dr. Chua. Yeah, I would say when we're talking about dollar and cents, that is what everyone's concerned about, how much you can get it, meaning when you can get back your return on investment. Well, nevertheless, solar is actually regarded as an investment. So we're talking about the ROI of 7 to 8 years. I think that was probably like previous years. And then now we are looking at the improvement, like relatively for a residential, depending on the scale, because when you're talking about ROI, depending on the size of the system. If you're talking about the size of the system is bigger, definitely you can look into economies of scale, and that is going to be brought out to maybe not to 3 years from now, but I would say in future that we go to 3 years. Why I say so? Because majority of our equipment are also imported, and is actually traded in USD currency. Of course, with the recent just lately improvement in the forex, will actually give us a confidence that this ROI could be further driven down. Yeah, so we do have a confidence on moving forward. Yeah, just maybe let's add on what Mitch also have highlighted on the ESG and the E. I would say it's very encouraged for individuals level and also business owners or even community level to actually go into the E in terms of the ESG, especially solar renewables energy, will actually helps you to switch from the fossil fuel to the clean energy. So that is the key thing, and I would say it's a low-hanging fruit. What you just need to do is to install the solar panels on the roof area that you have. Well, of course, you need to make sure it doesn't have any shading issue. So that is probably going to reduce the carbon emission immediately when it starts generating solar power from the rooftop. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Regine. Very good insight on that. Now, a question for Jonathan, right? You mentioned something about the lifespan of, the solar panels on the roof, right? And you mentioned a number of 25 years, right? So there's a question on from the audience, right? Warranty issue on solar panels is 25 years for inverters and cables. How would this warranty be enforced if the vendors wind up before the set period? I think this is quite an interesting question, because you mentioned about efficiency dropping to 80% after 25 years and possibly going up to 40 years. But how about the businesses, right? Will the businesses continue to be in service for that longer period of time?
Yeah, it's a good and fair question. So I'll give you a very practical answer. Something I'll just share in this session is that there's a very high chance the company will not be around because I've been through many different. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware, Shell and BP, the oil and gas company, used to produce solar panels with 25 years warranty. I work very closely with Panasonic and Robert Bosch to also at that time supply their solar panels to your roof. And yes, after a couple of years, sometimes corporate decisions could be made that they decide not to continue in the solar panel business. And then what happens? So I think generally now you see the offering is mostly tier 1 solar PV modules from China. And what the Chinese government has done is to get these national insurance to actually insure the value of your solar panel so that if the company ceases to exist for bankability reasons, that we use these panels, not just for your homes, but for power plants, you can actually get compensated from the national insurance company. Having said that, in a practical sense, in 10 years' time, whatever solar panel you buy today, you will not be able to source for the same one. That's just me being brutally honest with you, because it will continue to change and advance. It's very much like saying, if you want to buy an iPhone 1 today or an Android 1 today, you will not be able to buy it. You know, it's moved on and you're just going to go along with it. But the saving grace so far is, of course, it's only worth 10% of what it was last time. So for the same solar panel, you're only paying 10% of the price today compared to 10 years ago. So as we move on, new technology will come out, the price would change. It should or would go lower. I'm not sure if we're going to hit a plateau, but that's where it is. I think if the company winds up, you will get a monetary compensation. So there's one last fail-safe we do, which is we can actually get you a local insurance for your system that is on your roof. So if anything fails, not just the PV module, but the inverter, we can get you financial compensation to actually do a replacement to the latest and best technology that we have today.
All right, thank you very much, Jonathan. I think that sort of gives some level of assurance for those who are investing in solar technology that they have some form of compensation, over the years to come, if let's say the business intends to wind up and so on. Now, moving forward to the next question, we talk about feed-in tariffs versus the NEMs, right? Maybe I will open up this question for Mitch. Right? Could the feed-in tariff be reintroduced again instead of NEM, as it will be more financially viable to investors, especially to homeowners? What do you think?
I think I might defer this question to Yusuf or one of the other panelists. I mean, like I said, I would just say from the perspective of green buildings and environmental buildings more generally, our experience over the last 5 years is that the issue of cost is more often than not used as an excuse. And it's used as an excuse to maintain business as usual practices. So when, in our work with green buildings, over the last 5-10 years, we've had now 2,000 over buildings certified green in Malaysia. That represents a pretty, an incredibly robust data set. And when we analyze the data, what we find is that the average cost to upgrade a building to improve its environmental performance is less than 1% of its construction cost. So think about that for a second. Less than 1%, that's less than the price fluctuation in construction materials like concrete and steel. That's less than the amount that you, more or less on par with the amount that you spend on your fire protection systems. No one ever says, oh, my building complies with BOMBA, it's so expensive. It's just seen as a normal cost consideration to make a building in Malaysia or anywhere in the world for that part. So very, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger made a statement sometime last year. I'm going to paraphrase because the words he used were much more brutally honest than what I'll say. But what Arnold Schwarzenegger said is that anyone who tells you that cost is a barrier to uptake environmental performance is either not very smart or they're intentionally lying to you. because the issue of cost is no longer paramount for green buildings as compared to any buildings. Any building project that you take has cost considerations. You have high-end buildings, you have low-end buildings, you have clients with bigger budgets, you have clients with smaller budgets. Green just fits into a building project like any other consideration. The idea that making a building perform environmentally adds cost is a wrong idea. You can give me a building project that has no budget to do any extra features or systems, and I can give you a building that performs 30 to 40% above the Malaysian average with zero cost expenditure, just by way of good design practice. And this is true across the board for all different types of buildings. So that's what I would say about the issue of feed-in tariff, is that yes, they're great. Government incentive is great, but the lack of government incentives, the quality of government incentives, the quantum of government incentives is really not the issue here. The issue here is that people think that it's something that's new and expensive, when as a matter of fact, it's not. The data says 0 to 1% additional cost, and that includes solar, because like we said, the return on investment has gotten to the point where the systems pay for themselves, and they pay for themselves extremely quickly. So like Regine said, these are investments, and they're investments with very, very, very strong returns. So that's how it answers the question. But Yusuf, please jump in and add about the actual tariffs that are available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mitch. I think you put it very very good in the sense where, people need to start thinking about, investing in the future. And it's not just, future of their company, it's also future of, everyone, right? The society in Malaysia, where we all have to put in our own, individual efforts to actually make this happen together. Yeah.
One last thing, Dr. Chua, is that I like to compare it to fire safety.
Yeah.
All public buildings in Malaysia have comply with the Bomba Code. They all comply with they have fire sprinklers, they have escape stairs. These are systems that are designed because collectively as Malaysians and as collectively as people around the world, we've decided that fire safety is important to put into buildings in case the building catches on fire. Now, one good way to think of it is that our planet is now on fire. And so these systems and features are important for us to recognize collectively. This is the minimum that we need to do for our built environment to make it environmentally responsible for our children. And so the fact that it can be done with little to no additional cost, at least at the outset, makes it all the more compelling. But we don't argue. I've never had a client come to me and say, oh, this sprinkler system is too expensive. I can't put in fire safety into my building. It costs too much, because everyone simply understands the importance of fire safety. This is where we need to start thinking about the E and ESG. We don't have time to delay. The time is simply that we take it as a matter of fact. We give environmental considerations a seat at the table, and we incorporate it into all new buildings. We incorporate it into the retrofit of all of our existing buildings. End of story, period. There's no reason not to.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, Mish. I believe the key message to everyone is the time is now, right? And that's a very, very important thing to take away from today. Now, continuing on to the next question, right? This I'm going to pass it to Engineer Srizal. Is TNB going to have bi-directional EV charging facilities to reduce the burden of the national grid? Right? What do you think, Mr. Yusrizal? Since EV is starting to gain a lot of traction in Malaysia, and I think a lot of new EV electric vehicles are starting to be sold in Malaysia, right? How about these charging facilities, and how would solar play a role?
Okay. Yeah, before I address that question, I think riding on Mitch's comments just now, I think in terms of the availability of options, economically, it has already been commercially viable. And there are options in terms of net energy metering. The previous FIT is still around. I mean, no longer available for solar, but to kickstart the growth. Initially, it has played its role effectively, I think, but we continue on with net energy metering, and now we do have the even the large scale option. But before I go on to address the bidirectional option for EV, which is also one of a viable option, I think elsewhere it has been adapted. But just looking at the questions posted, I think there was a question posted by Raven Yap, wanting to know what's the limiting factor for a worldwide adoption of solar. And number two, I think IR Shakanda Singh also calls for best practices in the Europe to be adopted here. So before we go on to those two, I think I would like just to bring everyone's attention to the what we call as a energy trilemma. Probably some of you have come across this, and in any energy system design, I think the designer or the policy needs to address these three main things, which is economics, environment, as well as the reliability of the system. So talking about these three main factors, it is best to balance the three, although we do see more emphasis being put on the economics, which makes sense as a growing country like Malaysia. However, solar, I think, play its role very well here. It has no exposure to fuel cost risk. It has no exposure to geopolitical risk, whereby if you buy fuel from any other country, there's always this geopolitical risk that associates with it. So, however, one main issue, as highlighted also by John earlier, is the intermittency. But I believe going forward, there are going to be solutions available. There are going to be, technological advancement available. There are going to be subsequent, energy storage in the form of rechanneling this green energy towards hydrogen production, or to energy storage, or even the bidirectional options as addressed by the question just now in terms of EV. So I think number one, it's very important to understand that it's not just a matter of addressing the megawatt or the megawatt hour that solar are able to contribute. It's also important to understand that we need to balance these three. For example, the continental Europe, they are very well interconnected in terms of the regions, the countries. They are very well interconnected. Any shortfalls on one side should be able to be covered by the other side with other kinds of generation. So this initiative has already been, I think, embarked on by the ASEAN country through the ASEAN Power Grid Initiative. I think we are at the moment already connected to Singapore. The system is stronger, both sides, due to this interconnection. I think by now we do have 1,000 megawatts of interconnection between Singapore and Peninsular Malaysia. We are also connected 300 megawatts of HVDC facility in the north to Thailand. So that's also another option. We are exploring expansion to the west, Sumatra. We are looking at expansion to the east, to the Borneo side. And I think that these are all ongoing initiatives which will later make ASEAN power grid stronger, enable higher penetration of renewable energy. And last but not least, just to point out, I think there are also options of floating solar, even offshore floating solar being considered right now to minimize the impact of the land utilization. And obviously, I think in terms of large-scale solar developers, the likes of us, the likes of ERS, I think we are very concerned. We take note on the concern of the competition of land use between food production as well as power generation, and we make it very clear not to encroach into paddy fields. That's a no for us. Virgin forests or jungle, and most of the developments are being done on secondary agri land, which, going forward in the future, the owner might not, be keen to further utilize those lands anymore. So a short answer to the bi-directional EV chargers just now, obviously it's an option. Impacts on the reliability of the systems are being addressed and studied, but I believe, nothing is going to stop, as we advance in renewable energy. We want to get more clean energy sources. We are committed towards the net zero energy in the future, and all available options should be considered. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Yusril. Very good insights on the question that I have just shared. Now, moving to Regine, right? A lot of independent solar farms or plants and even offered solar projects are great projects that offsets carbon, right? The question is actually with regards to, are we generating carbon credits that could be sold to international markets? And if yes, this could potentially gain or generate additional revenue, which could bring down the overall cost of project. So what do you think, Regine, in terms of carbon credits?
Thank you, Dr. Chua. Yeah, one of the topics we also been formulated under the Carbon Core Task Force is carbon credits, or to be specifically is renewable energy credits. Yeah, because in terms of the solar PV system, it's actually qualified for the renewable energy credits, or the REC. So yes, there has been so-called early adoptions of renewable energy credits program that enable the solar system to be registered and to get the renewable energy credits, and so-called as a certified documentation to prove on their carbon emissions and also the carbon footprints. So we actually really encourage this, especially for those who want to get to actually achieve net zero. So at this point of time, that we think that you need to have on-site solar generation as well as off-site. So when the off-site and how it can be achieved, it can be achieved by renewable energy certificates and also other mechanisms. So this is what actually, yes, you potentially can look into. But of course, there is some so-called optimized capacity, because to go for this certification, there is actually required capacity. So it is only, I would say, viable for a commercial scale, at least for this movement. Yeah. So perhaps I can also add on a little bit of what has been debated earlier. Well, it's regarding to what we have also been highlighted in terms of the warranty to customers that selected solar modules or suppliers who has actually exceeded the market. But well, for example, like Bosch, they still have their parent company. So what has been so-called able to resolve is the parent company is still, giving the responsible for the warranty. Yeah. So just to give some assurance for some who actually installed, and then yeah, they might have some concern on it. Yeah. And this is how it has been justified. Yes.
Thank you very much, Regine. I guess most of the time adoption also comes in the terms of people need to be assured on the sustainability of the solutions or the investment that they're putting in. So as long as that's in, I believe that most of us will be a bit happier to now invest in solar advancement and also renewable energy for the future, right?
Definitely.
So the next question that I have for Jonathan, right? When we talk about energy, renewable energies, people start to think about energy storage solutions, right? Battery, hydrogen, etc. What is the most effective solution, right? When I talk to a few solar providers, they say that, battery storage solution is actually too expensive now. It's not really viable. But what is your opinion on it in terms of cost, space, and maintenance wise?
At this current moment in time, at this juncture, it's definitely battery. There are actually a lot of development going on globally to use batteries in very small pockets, and then they'll aggregate it to actually provide grid support. There are a lot of studies and research seeing how batteries can sustain utility grids. This will take time, but the available technology that's most, I would say, accessible right now is battery. It took battery technology at least 5 years to get to, if not 10 years, to get to where it is today. And the new sort of energy storage that we're all talking about right now, about hydrogen and about pumped hydro, about sort of different gravity type of energy storage, they're all going to take its time to commercialize, because we need to conceptualize and then commercialize the idea. So batteries have already hit the commercialization stage, and everyone's actually finding different utilities for it. So I think battery is going to be here to stay. For the next 5 years, we'll see an even higher adoption. And that is when the cost will start coming down, being more accessible to this part of the world in Southeast Asia. Because if you look globally in other countries where energy cost is high, it's actually driving a lot of investments into battery technology right now as we speak. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. I think that's also one important thing to think about when it comes to generating battery. It's not just about generating energy. It's not just about generation, but also seeing how we could effectively optimize the storage and reutilization of the energy for everyone. Now, one last question that I'm going to offer to Mitch, right? I think you definitely have a lot to say with regards to this question from one of the audience, right? Why is the take-up rate for solar still not at its optimum level, right, at the moment in Malaysia? What do you think is the real barrier, right, and the real challenge in terms of the take-up rate?
I like your timing, Dr. Chua. I just finished typing out a answer in the Q&A to this very question. So I can now just read from my answer. My answer is, it's a very good question. I do not know. I should start by saying that. It's a complicated question. I do not know, so I'll say that at the start. I will, however, offer a personal opinion, one possible reason. And one possible reason that the take-up is so low is that in many countries around the world, the issue of power supply is addressed at source. And so when we look at international comparisons, and this can be for what we call sort of developing nations, developing nations, it doesn't matter. Like Denmark, for example, uses, is Malaysia, and again, Yusuf, correct me if I'm wrong, the rough figures are Malaysia has about 1% solar power generated at source today in 2022. Denmark, by comparison, has about 86% renewables at source. Vietnam, as another developing nation, has something approaching 50% of their power from renewables. That includes a significant percentage of solar, as well as a slightly higher percentage of hydropower. So Vietnam, by any accounting, is no more developed nation than Malaysia is, and yet our power generated from renewable sources at source, at the power plant level, at the grid level, is well behind even other developing countries like Vietnam is a good example. Philippines is another. You go around ASEAN, it's available online, look at the percentage at source of other ASEAN countries with technologies like solar. Now, in Malaysia, we don't have access to wind. We're in the doldrums here, so our wind power is not strong. Geothermal, also limited. So we're, for the time being at least, limited to solar as our primary renewable source, but we need to do better. And so one of the reasons why we are lagging behind is the uptake at the national planning level, more pressure, more imperative to do better and to transition our power supply at source to more renewable sources. The other thing is that in Malaysia, a lot of the imperative to do this kind of action is shifted to the private sector. So when we talk about it, we talk about, oh, we need to put solar panels on our roof. And that, as I said earlier, that's important. But I think one of the primary reasons why the uptake is slow is just for that reason. The uptake by our national government is slow, period, end of story. Our private businesses, our companies, our individuals have the capacity to change very quickly. And historically, our government has lagged behind, doesn't feel the pressure, doesn't feel like this is something that they can do or want to do or have the capacity to do. And that it's important that that change, and that will change. The last thing I'll say is that I mentioned at the beginning, Denmark. Denmark has a grid supply which is now 80%, 86% renewable, but 25 years ago, they were more or less where Malaysia is now. So in 25 years, Denmark went from 90% fossil fuel to 86% renewables. So Malaysia can do exactly the same. When Denmark did it, the cost was 5 times greater. You know, Malaysia cannot say, oh, we're a developing country, we have no money. It's ridiculous. You know, Denmark is, yes, they have more money, but they did it when it was 5 times more expensive. We're doing it at a time 25 years later when the cost takes care of itself. So I think it's like Yusuf said, it's more about good planning. You know, there's the reliability, the environmental considerations, and the cost considerations. Well, the cost considerations are taking care of themselves. The environmental considerations are clear. The only variable that's left out of those 3 is good planning. And we can do it. I mean, one of the advantages of solar is that peak maximum demand for our electricity demand is during the day when the sun is shining. So we can use solar, we can use an increasingly large percentage of solar to take care of the maximum demand. We're not going to phase out oil and gas electricity overnight, but the oil and gas can be used for cloudy days, it can be used for overnight generation. Even without major batteries, we can still use solar to take the edge off the maximum demand and increase the performance of our grid. You know, I'm not an expert. I'm not a grid expert. I just know it can be done. The missing ingredient is our will and our desire to do it. And that starts with us doing it for ourselves. And it starts with us applying just a little bit of pressure onto our government to say this is something that's important to us to do and that they should look into with increasing intensity.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rich. Very well put. And I saw Mr. Yusridal, did you put up your hand just now? You raised your hand. You wanted to say something?
I just would like to add a bit. I think in terms of the plan, probably you guys have come across this Malaysia Renewable Energy Roadmap, which has been published earlier. In terms of the projection, I think within this 5 years up until 2025 and perhaps up until 2030, there are already projection or intention, aspiration to go to as high as 6,000 megawatts by 2025 in terms of solar capacity. I think we are right now in terms of committed capacity from the FIT days, NEM, large-scale solar, we are somewhere very close to 4,000 megawatts. Or I think the committed or the completed connected capacities are very close or slightly over 2,200 megawatts. So that builds up in terms of the power contribution to the grid. I think it builds up already close to 10% or slightly over 10%. Going to 4,000, going to 6,000, pretty much I think it will builds up to be 20 plus to 30% as a whole. Yes, as pointed out by Mitch, unfortunately, we are in the doldrums. We don't have sufficient wind, or with the current technology, we don't have that wind potential, sufficient wind potential. So solar is the best bet for us for now. So hence, I think in terms of the policy, the direction, making sure that, you know, costs are taken care of, stability of system are taken care of, solar should be able to provide this with, I think, some assistance probably coming in the future as we reach the penetration of about 6,000 megawatts. Then we're talking about the need to be able to have sufficient energy storage to complement the solar penetration. But as we go from now towards the future, I think the call is there, the aspiration is there. It's just how to realize, and having proper planning is very important, as well as having or strengthening the ASEAN power grid to make sure that we are well interconnected, and we are well balanced in terms of making sure the reliability of the system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yusril. And I think there's a lot of good insights from all the panel today, and I can see a lot of questions pouring in. Unfortunately, I can't go through every one of them. Of course, I hope that with keen interest from all the audience today, right, that you'll keep these questions with you, and if you do have them, you can actually drop an email to the team, right, of panels. You know who they are, and probably they could sort of help you answer that after the session today. So we are running, we have sort of expanded a little bit from the time, right? Nonetheless, I think we have covered quite a large area of topics today in terms of solar advancement. Right now, before we end the webinar session for today for everyone, right, I would like to invite the panels to give some one last key message in a sentence, right, to all the audience today. One of the great key takeaways from you in terms of their solar advancement or ESG journey. So perhaps, Jonathan, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think take the leap of faith. It's you can't go wrong with solar. I've seen it with my own eyes. To those asking if we do walk the talk, the panelists, we do. And I think it's imperative. We are in a climate emergency. So ESG is not just about greenwashing, but let's do our little bit for the planet. But it would also actually help your pocket in your savings. So give it a try. You won't regret it.
All right. Thank you very much. Regine, how about yourself? One key message, last key message for the audience today.
Yeah, besides us as a panelist to walk the talk, we hope the audience today also can walk the talk after hearing from everyone here talking about solar. So I would say just go for your house installation, and for businesses, go for your business to go for a lower carbon footprint by installing solar is actually the wise move. And is actually as I mentioned, low-hanging fruit. You just need to not leave your roof idle, but to install it solar. And one thing is actually, we are actually contributing to the operational carbon, especially if we're using the non-fossil fuel energy as the electricity generation. So we should do our part from the start, even from small to big. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Regine. Start small and then eventually scale big. That's the most important part, right? Mr. Yusril, any key message from you for the audience?
I think I echo both John and Regine. I think going forward, renewables will be contributing more. It's a matter of time, and it makes sense economically, it makes sense environmentally. There will be challenges, obviously, but as I think speaking probably on behalf of TNB, TNB is keen. We have made commitment towards net zero 2050. I think we have made commitments that there will be no new coal plants built by TNB. The first batch of retirements, I think based on schedule, will be going off by 2030. There's another batch. I think the last one would be in the 2040s, early 2043, I think. So commitments are there. Exploration in terms of new technology, looking at potentially renewables, increasing hydro, as well as looking at hydrogen option has already been embarked on. And I think it's only a matter of time. So let's go green.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Yusril. That's why let's go green. That's, I think, the last big key message for everyone. Now, last but not least, I have Mitch. Mitch, any key message for the audience today?
Yeah, I think it's been summed up very well. But you know, in my personal work over the last 10, 15 years, one of the things that's become increasingly clear is this idea of business as usual. And business as usual is an idea that we often fall back on, and businesses often fall back on, not because it makes sense, but because it's easy. And when you look at the details, when you run the numbers, you know, business as usual is not particularly good business. It's often used to entrench old ideas, to entrench ideas that are of limited capacity. They're there because they're convenient, and they're maintained because they're convenient, not because they're profitable. You know, whichever angle you cut it, looking at and including ESG and environmental considerations into your core business is not just good for the environment. It's not just good for your kids and your grandkids. It's actually good for your bottom line, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about are modern, efficient, streamlined business practices, which just by their very definition are profitable, are dynamic, involve balancing complex dynamics and putting your business up ahead. So it's really for anyone who's interested in ESG, anyone who's interested in environmental movement. It's not just adopting a good talking point. Take a serious look at how you can transition the way that you think about your business and make it work for you, make it more profitable for you. That's the bottom takeaway. Almost every example that I come across in my professional practice, businesses that are able to practice what they preach become more profitable, almost as a matter of course. And those that aren't, those that just give lip service, will increasingly be phased out and become increasingly non-competitive. So that's the bottom line. I mean, it's not a doom or gloom. It's a win-win. You take care of the environment, you take care of your profitability. One thing follows the other. So thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been a really great conversation.
Thank you very much, Mitch. And of course, thank you very much to all the panelists here today, Jonathan, Regine, and Yusrizal. It's good to have you share your insights and expertise with the audience here today. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. And of course, there's definitely a lot of burning questions about this space. And I think the key message or takeaway that I could summarize is, take that leap of faith, do something for the environment, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us. And I think that's the most important part in this journey of ESG for everyone, not just your businesses, but also for the community in Malaysia and the world, right? So I will end my session today by passing back the floor to Mohala, right, to wrap up the session. Mohala, back to you. Oh, hello, Mohala.
Thank you, Dr. Chua, and that was a great session. And something that Mitch said at the end kind of resonates with me, because he said you take care of the environment. And I say you take care of the environment and you take care of your only home. In that sense, unless Elon Musk has his and then you can go to another planet. This is the only home we had. So thank you so much, Dr. Chua, and thank you. And I will each panelist. Firstly, the evaluation poll, which will appear on your screen now. So while you complete the poll, please scan the QR code screen to register for the STAR ESG Awards next webinar, tentatively set on 6 March 2023. This webinar will focus on a framework for the transformation of businesses towards a diversified, equitable, and inclusive workforce, where fair reward and talent management processes can enhance retention, employee satisfaction, higher productivity. Basically, how to aspire to DI leadership that will cater to a global clientele. Do scan the QR code, and we would love to get your perspectives on best practices in talent management. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and I really appreciate the very engaging audience who asked so many questions and also Dr. Chua for moderating this so well with all the panelists who gave great perspectives on the solar industry. And I would like to thank also our OCBC Bank, our sponsor, and Hibiscus Petroleum for supporting and making this web possible. And this webinar is also endorsed by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, KETSA, and the Ministry of Environment and Water, KASA. Thank you so much, and everyone have a good week ahead. And if you'd like to rewatch this morning's session, you will be able to do so on our Starbees Facebook page. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
was a great
Guys, have a good
session.
week.
Thank
Have a
you.
good
Bye-bye.
week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Rowan.
Thank you, all panelists.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you, the star. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Mahal, for setting everything up, and all the
Thank
whole team
you.
at Star. It's really great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you. You're all great too.